Let's go to the county board workshop Monday, June 2023. Like joint workshop, move the county board of county commissioners come to order. We're going to open with prayer led by Mr. Stanley and pledge by Mr. Clark.
Dear Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity, Lord, to serve and use you, this county in which we live. God, we ask you to be in our midst tonight. God, give the school board and county commissioners, Lord, the wisdom that they need, Lord, to be servants of you. We love you and we thank you for all that you do in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving right along, now, I'm going to discussion. Mr. Edward Shooter, would like to call it.
Yes, I welcome everybody to the district workshop. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the district workshop. I thought what we could do for a format, I talked to Chairman Hayes and Chairman Casal that I could briefly go do an overview of the law as it pertains to redistricting, and then Mr. Kurt Spencer is here to make a presentation. He's the redistricting consultant that the Board of County Commissioners has hired. And then at the end of that, then we take questions from board members and the public. If the public has questions, I just thought it'd be good to kind of get through the basic information first and maybe answer some of the questions that people have. This is a workshop, so no formal action can be taken by either board, but the board can give direction. This redistricting consultant, Mr. Kurt Spitzer, is here. I'll tell you, he's very well regarded in Florida. In fact, I talked to some other county attorneys and school board attorneys who called him the guru. So I think that you know, we have someone here that has a lot of knowledge about the subject matter, and I urge you all to use this time to make the most of your questions for him. I wanted to point out that he's going to give a presentation up there. Unfortunately, it's not the same as I tried to take some of these away. It's not the most updated. What he's going to present you is the most updated slides. I think there was a printer problem and we didn't get enough copies for everybody. So regardless, we're looking at his slides. I also passed out to everyone, and there's a couple of copies over there on the table too, the most current law on redistricting, and I also passed one out at our last redistricting workshop. But if you picked it up then, disregard it, because since our last redistricting workshop, which we couldn't have because of the tornado, there's a new law that's come into effect. It was passed by the legislature, signed by the governor, and it does affect this redistricting process. So I put the most recent law that incorporates this new bill. It should be in front of everyone. And I'm just going to go over that real briefly. The law as it pertains to redistricting in Florida. The Florida Constitution addresses redistricting of county board of county commissioners, and I've kind of highlighted on this sheet the most pertinent part as far as redistricting. But when it talks about the board of county commissioners seats, it talks about their terms, and then it says in the Florida Constitution, after each decennial census, the board of county commissioners shall divide the county into districts of contiguous territory as nearly equal in population as practicable. One commissioner residing in each district shall be elected as provided by law. And I kind of wanted to start there because I know that there's I've heard some voices in the community saying, why are we doing this? Why are we wasting our money on this? Liberty County doesn't need to do this. I disagree respectfully with that conclusion. I think that the Florida Constitution mandates that after the census comes out, right now we're working with our 2020 census, that the Board of County Commissioners and school boards have a constitutional obligation to engage in this process. And I think the Supervisor of Elections did the right thing by bringing it to our attention that we've got some our districts are not updated. How this happens is also addressed in Florida statutes. In Florida statute 124.01, it says, there shall be 5 county commissioners districts in each county, which shall be numbered 1 to 5 inclusive and shall be as nearly equal in proportion to population as practicable. So this kind of mirrors the constitutional language when it talks about having the population in each district be as equal as possible or practicable. It also says in the highlighted pertinent part, the Board of County Commissioners shall from time to time fix the boundaries of the county commissioners districts so as to keep them nearly equal in proportion to population as practicable, provided, okay, so here we go into the new changes that have been made to Florida statutes since this new law came into effect, which is HB 411. HB 411 just passed in this legislative session. It was signed by the governor, and it's current law. Now what the legislature has also said is that you can't make any changes to the districts 270 days before a regular general election. And there's also a section on that affects school districts. I'm going to get to that too, but for the purposes of this Florida statute 124, it says 270 days before a regular election for the Board of County Commissioners. And now the new language says districts may not be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a candidate for county commission or an incumbent county commissioner based on the candidate's or an incumbent's residential address. Any ordinance enacted or adopted by the county on or after July 1st, 2023, which is in conflict with this subsection, is void. If you look to the second page of the sheet that I passed out, it kind of has mirroring language with respect to school districts. In Florida statute 1001.36, it says, for the purpose of electing district school board members, each district shall be divided into at least 5 district school board member residence areas, which shall be numbered 1 to 5 inclusive, and which shall, as nearly as practicable, be equal in population. A school district may make any changes it deems necessary in the boundaries of any district school board member residence at any meeting of the district school board, provided that's, again, here we have the same changes that the legislature made to the county commissioners redistricting language, that you can't make a change 270 days before a general election, and that the residence areas may not be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a candidate for school district board member or an incumbent, and that any resolution adopted after July 1st, 2023, which is in conflict, is void. So I want to say that when we started this redistricting process, I know that our consultant, we were not operating under this new law, and our consultant did generate some district possible maps, redistrict maps to everyone that identifies the sitting board members' residence. So I know they're out there. I don't think that taints our process necessarily. For purposes of this workshop, we've given you some maps that don't identify residence areas, but I will say this. If the boards take action to redistrict and you redistrict before July 1st, you can consider the residence areas of the sitting district board members, basically. After July 1st, if you were to redistrict, you cannot consider the sitting board members' addresses. So That has traditionally been a criteria that, has been acceptable. The legislature is now saying it's not acceptable, but there is a window of time where you could act and you can consider when you're drawing those lines where our sitting board members are living. So, again, I will take questions at the end of this along with Mr. Spitzer. I'm just gonna make a couple more comments. You know, that where redistricting this law comes from, it comes from our Florida Constitution and statutes. It also comes from some federal constitutional principles. The Equal Protection Clause basically ensures the principle of one person, one vote. That's what's kind of driving this desire, or this mandate, I should say, to have the districts as equal as possible, practicable in population, is sort of this constitutional idea that one person, one vote principle, everybody we should have these districts be equal, so that the representatives have an equal, kind of as equal number of people as possible in their districts. It's just a sort of a fairness principle. There is a little bit different case laws that have developed. There's a Florida case law that is developed, and there's federal case law that's developed. In Florida, there's a few Supreme Court cases that address redistricting, and there's a very early case that says you don't have any discretion basically to deviate from this equal as possible ideal. There are some later cases that give some more discretion to deviate from this equal as possible and practicable ideal, as long as you're focusing on sort of neutral redistricting principles. I think what you cannot do, and what the legislature now makes clear that you can't do, is to draw lines to benefit a candidate or an incumbent. That's called gerrymandering. You're never going to find any case that says that that's okay. Federal law has sort of come up with Mr. Spitzer is going to talk about this 10% deviation that's been recognized in the law. That is something that's really been developed in federal case law. And I did read a 2016 U.S. Supreme Court case on that. Again, you're trying to get the districts as equal in population as practicable. You can have some deviation. The deviation that really is going to be acceptable always is 10% and less. Greater deviations, to have them upheld if you were to be challenged in the court, again, you need to be basing the decision on these legitimate objective criteria. And Mr. Spitzer is going to talk to you about keeping districts compact, maintaining communities of interest, considering geographic boundaries, that type of thing. One of the things I've also been asked about, I know I'm kind of plowing through this, but again, I'm more than happy to take questions at the end of the both presentations, is whether the prison population should be counted or not. I think traditionally, prison populations were counted because prison population is counted in the census, and the census is really kind of what drives redistricting. I will say that in Florida in 2016, there was a Florida federal court case that struck down a Jefferson County redistricting plan because it included the prison population, because the court ruled that it violated the one person, one vote type of equal protection principle. In other words, it's called prison gerrymandering, where you're basically flooding a district with prisoners, and then you're back to the situation and you're not getting equal one person, one vote kind of protection. So there was this 2016 Northern District Court case that struck down that Jefferson County, and since then there has been a trend not to count the prison population. I think with the kind of the thinking is that don't vote and they're separated, if they're separated from deciding, they're not really voting in Liberty County, you know, making using Liberty County services, that type of thing. If you're an isolated population, then it doesn't make as much sense to count prisoners. I know that our consultant is also gonna suggest that we not count prisoners just because we're so small that we would practically have a district unto itself based on our prison population. There's also currently a bill in Congress that would allow counting of prisons, because again, they call it prison gerrymandering. But those are kind of the legal principles I wanted to go over before Mr. Spitzer launches into his presentation. I'm gonna let him take it over.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity here. I guess I'll talk maybe a little bit about myself and the company and the work that I'm doing, and we'll get into the process here. My background is we have the company's been in existence since 1989. Prior to that time, I was with the Florida Association of Counties for 10 years. The last few years as the executive director of the company, so of the association. So our company has a local government focus that we do. All of the services that we do either are provided in local government or provided based on our knowledge of local government. In terms of redistricting, over the past 20 years or so, we've redistricted, I think, maybe 30 or 35 local governments, ranging in size from Quincy, about 7,500 people, to Columbus County, almost 1 million people, and a lot of things in between. So we were the consultants on the Jefferson County case, so the one that was drafted based on current case law and AGO opinions that got thrown out. Then we revised the plan after Judge Walker said you can't count for the population. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about redistricting, the criteria that are used, the process, and then we'll jump over into the data. And after this PowerPoint, we can jump into the software, and I can show you how the software works. Redistricting is the process by which the governing bodies, whether it's the school board, the county commissioner, or the legislature, or the city council, adjust district boundaries so that the districts are nearly equal in population. It's not reapportionment. Is when Congress reallocates the number of congressional seats to the state based on changes in population. I think Florida gained 1, maybe 2 congressional seats this last go around. We do this to meet the requirements of the Florida statute and the Constitution. It also furthers the principles of equal protection, the right to vote, and the Voting Rights Act of Congress. There are some general criteria that we follow, and the dominant criteria is population. Districts should be as nearly equal to population as is practicable or possible, was the old phrase of statutes, as they can. And over the years, there's been case law that's developed to determine what that really means. And we'll get into that in a second. We don't dilute minority voting strength, not a criteria, but in practice, a practical criteria, we use census blocks. Data comes down from the census in things that are called blocks. Sometimes they're block shaped. Other times they look anything like a block, and we'll see what they look like here in a second. But all of the data in there, it tells you how many people live there, how old they are, what their race is, that sort of stuff. So if you have the right software, you can change these lines and change the numbers of people in each district and the racial composition. Then there's a series of criteria that really are sort of like common sense things that make it easier for voters to understand what district they are, and where one district ends, the next district starts. You try to follow significant boundaries, a major road, a water body, things like that. Districts have to be contiguous. Can't hopscotch from over one district to continue another district. They should be relatively compact. You try to preserve communities of interest, whether it's a city, a neighborhood, things like that. And you still can consider existing district boundaries under the federal law, and you may consider future growth, and there's some criteria for that. So we'll go through these here. Equal in population as is practical. In my view, we should review the need to redistrict after the census. The census day for 2020 was April 1st of 2020. As everybody knows, there are a lot of problems with the census this last time, primarily due to the COVID pandemic. The Bureau of the Census actually shut down field operations for a couple of months. The census is supposed to be due to Congress by the end of the year, it's not received until February, March, and the data to the states and local governments was supposed to be due by the end of March. It was not received until the end of September in 2021. But nonetheless, we should look at the need to, and as Jennifer mentioned, at least for county governments, it used to say must redistrict in an odd number of years. Now the law says 270 days for the next general election. This is Article 8, which is the city and county article of the Florida Constitution, which shall divide the districts into contiguous territory that are as nearly equal in population as is practicable. From Chapter 1.4, this is the new language, as nearly equal in proportion to population as is practicable. And for the school districts, similar language in terms of district population to be almost equal. What does that mean? Well, I can tell you it's impossible to develop a plan where the districts are exactly equal population. And not only is population the dominant criteria, but there's 5 or 6 other criteria that we'll go through here. And you sort of balance these together, and we do the best that we can in developing the new plan. Generally speaking, plans where they are, the target is to get plans that are equal. There's no deviation from the average district size. It's really hard to do, but if you get plans where the largest one may be 3% over and the smallest is 3% under, that's a good target to try to get. Population is not registered voting, it's population. The number of people who said I live in Liberty County, that's what we use. And in terms of the 10-point rule, if there are districts where the average, the discrepancy between the smallest and the largest is greater than 10 points, that can raise a red flag. Speaking of Jefferson County, this was Jefferson County several years ago, and they had the average size was a little bit under 3,000 people. One district was almost 5.5% over. The smallest district was about 7.5% under, and so it's a deviation not of 12.8%, but 12.8 points. And so that raises a red flag, and Jefferson County had to change their boundary lines to get it under that 10% threshold. So that's a short summary on population. We avoid plans that dilute minority voting strength. Don't try to pack all of the minority population into one district, and we try to not divide the population amongst multiple districts so as to have the effect of diluting minority voting strength. We use census plots that are readily available. The data is presumed to be correct in court. If you were out maybe 5 years from now, and for some reason you wanted to redistrict, you could supplement the census data with other bits of information. We've done that, used either building permits, trends, or the University of Florida data, is also very good, but you have to have valid reasons why you do it. And you need to well document that in the process. But here, we're still relatively soon after the last census. There's no need to adjust the census data. We follow major natural or man-made boundaries. It's easier to understand. It's less disruptive to go to the precincts. Almost always coterminous with the boundaries of census blocks, and it's easier for the voter to understand as well. Just to be contiguous, try to keep communities together, and you avoid districts with so-called bizarre shapes. You all know the gerrymandering story is Elbridge jury from Massachusetts, where that term came from. Here's a more modern day example. This plan was thrown out in court, and this is what that plan really looked like. This was a congressional district, and that was rejected by the Supreme Court in 1993. So you avoid districts that have bizarre things. So in summary, these are the general criteria. It's impossible to develop a plan where all of these criteria are met perfectly. So we do the best that we can, given the nature of the county and the change of the data. We balance these and complement each other. So here's one quick little case study of Quincy. With the work of Tallahassee and Gadsden County. Quincy had not redistricted in 45 years. There was a court order ordering them to go from at-large districts to single-member districts. After that happened, and they redrew their district, they did not redistrict them in 45 years. And so that, as I recall, there was 110 point spread between the smallest and the largest. And they were way out of whack. Here was the existing districts, and then the adopted plan, we got down to about a 5-point spread. And so it required significant changes from the boundaries, but the March 2020 plan was adopted by the city commission. I think there's like 4 to 5 votes there. And so for Liberty County, this is your current district's population, not including present population. And Jennifer mentioned this. Let me just touch on that real quickly. The present population, I believe, is about 1,700 people. So with present population, the total population of the county gets closer to 8,000. And so if you divide that by 5, you come up with a target district size of around 1,600 people. So that's less than the population that lives in the present. And so now you could draw a district that was just around the present as one district. Or since the present is kind of located at the northern end of the county, you could perhaps split that present population between the 2 northern districts in the county. But in any event, from a practical point of view, county present population is going to force consideration of very radical changes to the district shapes in Liberty County. And also, by the way, Judge Walker in Tallahassee in the Jefferson County case said, you know, people in prison don't have the right to vote, but they have no access to obtain the right to vote at the present time, not until they finish their sentences. And secondly, the county provides no services. They have their own water sewer system, food, healthcare, that sort of thing. And it violates the equal protection provisions of the Florida, of the US Constitution. So, we did not count the present population. This here is the current districts without counting the present population. And as you can see, we're about 65 points apart in terms of the largest versus the smallest, but way over 10 points. In federal law, there have been exceptions to that 10-point rule that are well documented, but I've never seen one that goes beyond about 16 points. So here we're at 60 or 65 points. So in my view, you need to change those boundaries. Let me go through these columns first, just to let you know what they are. The first column is the target population of each district. The second column is the actual population, and that's expressed in both total numbers of people and voting age. People who are 18 years old or older, they have the ability to vote. Sometimes in days gone by, you would see cities and counties that redistribute based on registered voters. You really shouldn't do that. But you can control that with the age population. And then there's the deviation in terms of numbers at percent, how many in the district, over or under the target size. And then there's a series of columns 3 on race, white, black, and other. And we have the same date. In the census form, there's like 6 different categories that someone can check off in terms of what race they are. White, black, Native American, Pacific Islander, things like that. And you can also handwrite something. Beginning with the last census and continuing with this one, the Bureau of the Census allowed people to check off more than one category. And not just 2, but they could check up to 5. And so there's multiple combinations of race that could be there. And so in white, it's just people who said, I'm a white Caucasian person. For black, the practice is to count people who said, I'm either a single race African American person, or I have 2 racial backgrounds, one of which is African American. The legislature uses 3. If someone said, I'm of 3 different racial backgrounds, one of which is African American, they count that person as being black or African American. But that for here is people who said, I'm 2 racial backgrounds, one of which is black. Then for other, it's everything else. People who were Native Americans, had maybe 3 different racial combinations, but it's everything else. And then there's Hispanic. Hispanic is not a race, it's an ethnicity. And so I could say that I'm a white Hispanic person or a black Hispanic person, but it's not a race. And so when you want a total of the total number of people in each district, county, you add other, black, and white. If you add Hispanic, you get more people than what really live. So that's just all of the columns and all of the plans. That's what you see here. So we're 65-point spread here. District 1 needs to gain. District 1 and 4 need to gain. The other 3 need to lose population. And we'll get into this in a second when we jump over into the software. Our obligation to the county was to come up with 2 or 3 different plans, and it's difficult to do, given the nature of the population and significant natural and man-made boundaries and things like those criteria. And so we came up with 2 plans in terms of population. They're identical to one another. The only difference is that one plan follows the existing boundary through I believe it splits the present area. The other plan follows Dempsey Barron Road in that area, but it doesn't change the population. Then the second plan, or 2A, the third plan, it's a very different, plan, but it's very different. But they're both legally sufficient, in terms of, population. So I guess now we could take questions that you might have either for myself or the attorney.
I've got a question on the census. That's the papers that they send out and you fill out and send back in. Is that what you're going by on the population?
Well, what we're going by is either that or if someone submitted it in some other manner, but it's census data, 2020 census data from the Bureau of the Census.
I'm in a lot of houses every day, and I know a lot of people throw that the garbage can, so what filling that out. So I don't know how accurate your numbers are, and with COVID going on, I'm still not sure about how accurate people wouldn't touch a piece of paper and wouldn't touch anything. That just raises a red flag in my eyes, on these numbers here. That's my opinion. I could be wrong.
We try to get the census tries to improve the data collection every decade. They have said that the census did undercount certain populations, African American and Hispanic folks primarily. I don't know if they've done this yet or not, but they were going to update those numbers for states, but they were not going to update those numbers for anything lower than at the state level. I'll say that it's the best that we have.
I understand. I've just heard a lot of people say that. I don't know where. I know everybody knows where, but I know they know where they're at anyway. But they don't feel nothing out of us. Well, people, whoever getting up with them. That'd be hard for me to go by that on changing any district lines. That's just my opinion.
I have a Supreme Court case. He's not here tonight, but he just called me towards the end of the week, which was in Alabama, in the same deal that the Supreme Court overruled because of the minority majority. And it's been going on for a few years, but they just ruled on it a week ago. And my district 1 is majority minority. And you start moving those lines and out of these, you change it to the majority minority in district 1. And the prison population, I've been told, I've asked questions, we got a clerk here, we got a clerk here, and I talked to other clerks, but in some of our fundings, our prison population, from my understanding, the reason it was counted to start with was because of funding. Some of the funding, so you take that out, you take some of the funding, and you're going off of registered age of voters in the district by census that you have, not the actual people that votes in the county or in that district that you serve.
On the point of funding and things like that, if you look at any data from DEPA, it's the University of Florida's Bureau of Economic and Business Research. They are the folks who provide data and population estimates for a whole range of areas to the state of Florida. They always pull out the present population. It's not counted in terms of revenues.
One of your things there on your, like I said, on your highlight guidelines was vote for loose minority voting, and that's you're going to double. You're taking that away from my district by moving anything besides what it is today.
Right, and Judge Walker would say if you count those folks, there are two problems I mentioned before. One is from a practical point of view, assuming we want to redistrict, you got to get the populations as nearly equal as possible. And so somehow you're going to have to deal with those 1,700 folks that live in that district. Either it's one district all by itself, or you try to split it among the two northern districts in the county. But then beyond that, Judge Walker has said violates the equal protection clause because these folks can't vote. They have no ability to try to get the ability to vote because they're still incarcerated. And, by counting them where they really can't vote, it limits minority voting straight to everybody else.
I got a question. Through this whole packet we got here, it says population, they don't say nothing about voting age, registered voters. It says the population. And the prison up there is part of the population of this county. And I don't know how a judge, I'm a dummy, I ain't no law, but I don't know how a judge can change the law and the wording of the law to say they don't count. I don't understand that. It's going basically against laws we have, because it says population.
Well, I'll say this, and Jennifer alluded to this as well. The census counts everybody, prison population as well. And because of that, the law is evolved. Years ago, we counted everybody. Although there are some small counties, by the way, which that might have multiple prisons in them, and they have not counted. But even prior to Judge Walker's decision. But we redistricted Jefferson County, and we counted everybody, including the prison population. And there was a lawsuit that was brought either by the NAACP or the ACU, they both, that said the decision was can't count the prison population. And the reason for that was, that was stated before, the county provided those services to these folks. They don't have the ability to vote for county commissioner or school board member. And so that was a change in the law. And he said, you cannot count the prison population.
But the county does provide services to the prison population. Ambulance service. They got one got to go to the hospital. They call the county, they go get it. So we do provide services to the prison up there. And educational services is handled through the state mostly. But there is some coordination through the county that does. So based on what I've seen wrote right here, we should be basing our decisions on population. Not only who's eligible to vote, how many voters we got in that county. Based on that, all these maps and numbers I've seen, it don't include any prison population. They took them out, and that skews the data over the last 10 or 20 years. Since our lines was wrong, and yeah, we tweaked some over the last 20 years, but basically they stayed the same.
I don't know when the last time the county we did it was.
And
I'm sorry. Mr. Spitzer, I know you ran the numbers both with the prison population and the prison population not counted. Would the county, in your opinion, have to redistribute it either way?
If you count prison population, that's 65 point. That 65 point spread. There we go.
drop way down.
No, it goes way up. It goes way up.
I think it's when Rockwell and right?
No. If you count the present population, what happens is that it adds significant population to those two districts in the north, one especially. The spread then is District 1 is 52, about 52% over the target, and District 4 is about 39% under the target. And so if you counted that population, you still would have to redistrict, and then you'd have to figure out how to deal with that present population.
So what? Now, I might be bad wrong, somebody correct me if I am. The prison population was split up there, going right down the center of the prison, last time we did this. So half of it was in Rock Bluff District, and half of it was in Oxford District, split it up. So that made these numbers almost balance out.
It's not split evenly. There's a couple of blocks, census blocks that, comprise the present area, and I have to go back and look at the data, but there's one district where the majority of the present population, the overwhelming majority, and the other district with the lesser population.
So just to summarize what you're saying, in your opinion, we have to redistrict even money because.
There's,
Okay.
it's not a question.
How hard would it be to move that line to split the prison?
We, splitting blocks, it could be done. Splitting blocks is, we try to avoid splitting blocks, but you could do it.
You got 800 beds on this side of the room, and 800 on this side, make that district line right between those 800 beds.
What they also do is,
But then the problem is, you still will have this large number of people in these two different districts, and then the rest. I think you'll end up with maps that are even more different than what I have.
Kind of even out if you split the prison, if you thought of bring those two low districts. That District 1 would probably go. No, it'd go down.
if they split the prison back then, the prison has already, already took the work down off one side and put it back on his side. So from the last data, there was probably more inmates on my side of the prison that they split than what they are now, because they built the work in. It's moved the work count into Doyle's district.
I got a direct question for you. Does that have to be a line, a specific line, or could you say in wording? Don't even worry about a line, half of the prison population goes to this district, half goes to this. In the event that they change housing, locations, would that be legal, or does that have to be a defined line?
You'd want to have a lot. I mean, the supervisor needs to have voter precincts and things like that, so there need to be a line there. But I think that's if you wanted to do that, and you know, we're talking about the mechanics of how to include the counties, folks, what Judge Walker said, don't count.
Let me ask this, Judge Walker, did anybody appeal his ruling?
No.
And
Well, I don't know what the law is on how long, that was in 2016, but, no one has yet, I don't. And we're in the middle of Jefferson County right now, and there's no interest in counting the prison population.
I want to echo what Jim said. The census that was done in 2020. I'm not feeling it either. I know a lot of people, and I personally know, and I bet you there's a lot of people in this room that took that census and put garbage. Grant, are you? I can't see you. Sorry. When you and I discussed this a while back, and I'm gonna go back to the statute in just a second, the Constitution. But you said that there was possibly some software coming down the pipe for you that may be implemented in approximately 2 years, a year, that you would be able to get a better accurate count of population. Do you wanna talk about that a little bit?
It's the software that he has. I mean,
He has that software now.
You can only use the information that you have, you can't. You know,
Okay, I'm going somewhere, stay with me.
Blocks up and he'll show you in the software. You know, you have defined areas, this is how many's in this area, this is their race, this is their age. And then you move on to another one. The county's built up of a bunch of those, that's what districts are made of a bunch of census blocks. So if you go to split a census block, I have no idea, if he said he don't like to do it, I can imagine the difficulty of that. But that is the software that Jackson County was telling us about, was they did the redistricting that they had, where they could drag the mouse and add people.
But it's all based on census numbers.
It's all based on.
Okay,
census
so,
data.
okay, so I was mistaken when I understood you to say that you would be able to actually know how many people are in the, okay, just based
I
on.
can't
census.
know anything unless I get the information.
Right. Okay,
You know, knock on somebody's door and see that there's 10 people in that
Right.
house building.
That's
There might not be
typically-
10 there. A lot. or
Right.
whatever, you know. So we just deal with the information that you have.
okay, so let me go back to the Constitution of Health. And tell me, your attorney, I'm gonna turn to our attorney here. It says, after each census, Board of County Commissioners shall divide the county into districts as nearly equal. That's not legal, it's a little loophole there that we think, I mean, if that thing defended, that's pretty broad as nearly. That's pretty broad language in my opinion, but I'm not an attorney, you tell me. I mean, if we got pretty close, like we're talking about these lines. I mean, and say we were, you know, somebody filed a suit against us. Has that been challenged yet in court, this new language, or as nearly?
Okay, so that's the language that's been in there, and
It's down in part two.
right, yeah, so this is not new language, this is the standard is that you try to get it as nearly as equal, and as far as variation, so 10% variation and lower, according to the US Supreme Court, is presumptively acceptable. Basically, that's within the level of variance. That's anything above a 10% or variance is a red flag, and then to have a greater variance than that upheld in court, you'd have to have kind of some reasons for that, like objective reasons, like for instance, I read a court case where it was a county that had a rural area and then a tourist area, and the tourist area was just growing really fast. So basically the court is saying, yes, there's a higher variation here, but we've got some things happening in the population that are changing. So, right, it doesn't have to be equal, you get some variance, 10% below is considered the acceptable variance. If you go above that, then you want to have reasons that you have these kind of objective, politically partisan reasons, I guess, that you have there. I did kind of also want to mention, because I know we're talking about minority representation. Liberty County does have at-large elections, which so everybody gets to vote for every commissioner, school board member. What I've seen is when there's been sort of race-related challenges to the districting or to districts, that this usually drives more of a single member district kind of situation, which is not what Liberty County has. But in the past, I think there have been some challenges based on that. But we don't have single member districts, we have at-large districts.
And based on, I guess, legislation they signed this year. It don't matter where you live in the county. If I wanted them to have them run in District 5, I had to qualify and very run. And if I was elected at that position, then I would just have to move and live there on the first day that I took office.
It's new law for school district. School board
Just school
member.
district.
I did not see that that was also. the law for-
To run in that district, you have to live in that,
Huh?
to run, to be a candidate in a district, you have to live in that district.
I think it's changed, that's
Yeah,
great.
I think they changed it for school board members. now.
I think they changed county commissioners in.
That, before, or 70.
County was already that way. Because I challenged that for 3 years ago. I've had a man run against me ever since I've been in the district. It's not in my district.
They live
They
there.
told me that when you was county commissioner, on the county commissioner side, when you could run, and I could run against both. But I haven't moved in that district if I got elected.
Yeah.
Grant, and what the legislature did this year for, and I can't speak with county commissioners, I haven't researched it, but what they did change for school board members in Florida statute 1001.361. They changed it to say each elected candidate for district school board member must, by the date she or he assumes office, be a resident of the district school board member residence area from which he or she was elected at the date that they assume office. So they did make that change for school district members.
But we're talking about countywide, yes, we are voting countywide, but we still have districts. That's what we're talking about, district lines, and putting those people in that district. And like I said, I got one copy of this for this. Because I just got back home and, that was given to me. About this Supreme Court ruling in Alabama, which was just last week. By taking the majority out of it. And that affects, if you take out the prison population and change mine, that changes the whole game back to what the county went through in the 80s. And just what they just, Supreme Court just voted in Alabama last week. And I think this case in Alabama been going on since 2016, somewhere around there. But it just affects mine by taking it out and dramatically on the minority majority, which is on that topic. One of the bulletins. But that's just where I stand. I don't have much more than that. I'm kind of with James about the prison population, the way it's been. And in my opinion, I'll give my final opinion and nobody else to talk, but we leave it like it is, and state or whoever makes us change, then we can say, look, this is the reason we did it. But as of now, I don't see any, I say leave it like it is and keep on trucking, but that's my final opinion.
So my question to that, here, we got to the district, got savings in 10%. And if we did in the district, what would happen?
Okay, so if you don't redistrict, and you're challenged, what can you do for district?
There's no
Very challenge.
need.
Anybody in the world.
Anybody who's disgruntled, yeah, can challenge it. I mean, will you get challenged? I don't know. I mean, maybe, but I will say this, if you're challenged after July 1st, you will not be able to consider, sitting members.
What?
So up to July 1st, we've been able to kind of get, and I know some counties that are kind of starting to speed up their process and try to get theirs done before July 1st, but if you were to get challenged and a court made you in the district, which could happen, but may never happen, I don't know. In the future, you would not be able to consider their sitting membership.
Yeah, let me say this, adding the prison numbers back into the numbers that's on this page of actual population. This is what I got the district breaking down to. 1659 for District 1, 1604 for District 2, 1359 for District 3, 1692 for District 4, and 1621 for District 5. And the deviation from these numbers, which put District 3 as I split the prison 50-50 on it. And that's the numbers. That means District 3 would be the least populated district. So we have District 2 and District 4, which we would consider that redistricting if we did anything. We would be redistricting, right? If we move England, we would.
Yes, you would be redistricting if you move lines.
I'm asking these questions. You have to get through the state, you don't think they're away. Well, I think right now today, yeah.
And according to the rules, you ain't gonna give them exactly. You gonna get.
That's not actually something going on anyway. That's what the census is. I'm telling you, when total was out.
Well, the prison's probably the only accurate census there is.
Yeah.
Every person here.
Well, you know what's sitting out there, but people, I mean, they was warning you about COVID. Staying on a piece of paper live for so many days. People wasn't touching it. They wasn't. That was the last thing people was worried about was feeling a piece of paper out of those over the air.
You could be filing against it if you did redistrict, before coming up with the dollar. If you do change your mind, I guarantee you're going to have a lot of filing against redistricting. So either way,
I mean, you take away that District 1, you got one of the other districts balance up, District 3. So, I ain't got all the answers, I just gonna find a question. Oh, so.
It says that they changes cannot be made within 270 days of the election. So if both boards said not gonna do anything, and we rock down the road, we can do it for the next general election? Is this at any time, or can we only do it right after? Because I know my question at the last meeting was, because it said odd number of years. So I knew that we're in 2023, so if we choose no action, we can consider it again in 2025. But with this new language, can we consider, I don't know, like, can we only do it up until 270 days for this election, and then it's done until the next census, or after that?
Then it's done until
The next election.
Until we.
270 days before the next. So what the effect of that for counties is that you get a couple more months of breathing room. It used to be had to get it done by the end of the odd number year, by December 31st. I think, you back out 270 days from the general election and come to February or something like that. So it's a little bit more breathing room. But then if you miss that, then you're off to the next 270 day period, the next general election.
So when is that deadline for?
Well, I don't know when the next. It's in February.
February?
I don't know when the 2024 general election is. I don't know what. November 10th. So you back up 270 days from November 6th. It comes in, I believe it's in February.
And then you have to go by census block. Well, you said you don't have to, but you use census block. How many blocks is the prison in? Is it 2 census blocks? And are there other homes outside? Like if we.
No. There are, it's spread over 2 census blocks. There are no from the satellite image, there's no other residential area. There are some, residences for people who work at the presence, but they're not incarcerated. But it's in those blocks, but and there, of course, it does people who don't live on the present ground, but they go to work back and forth.
So the prison's in 2 blocks then? I thought just a while ago it said it was just one block.
It's split among 2 census blocks.
So how many is in each block?
I'd have to go back and look, but it's around 1,700 people total, and the great majority are in 1 block, and I think it's all, just off the top of my head, but I believe it's 300 or 400 in the other one.
It's
Something like that.
I thought it said, the primary block is located in District 1, this is what you told me before, it has 1,612, 13 people. The other block is located in District 4 and has 139.
Okay, that could be.
That's probably the work out there now. And the rest of it in civil for my life. That's what we did. Yeah.
I guess so, yeah.
You was talking about Judge Walker, what excluding the prison population, but he wouldn't take into consideration also that us making these changes, we're changing from a majority minority district that will not, the minority won't be the majority again.
Yeah, but it's almost the same thing in Jefferson County. I'm not Judge Walker, he didn't. I would say, he would say part of that majority minority are folks that can't vote. And they have no ability to get the right to vote at the present time, so.
Are there any other questions?
How do you know whether the minority, that you say they can't vote, how do you know that?
Well, people who are incarcerated in a state or federal prison.
I knew that, I'm talking about other cities.
Well, there are maybe, off the top of my head, maybe 10 or 15 people who are in those, who reside in those 2 blocks that are not incarcerated. And so certainly they work there. And so I don't know if they have registered to vote or not, but they certainly could have the ability to vote. But most folks who are in those blocks are incarcerated and they do not have the ability to vote at the present time.
I think she may be asking also in the whole county. There may be people that are registered voters and they have lost the right to vote. How do you know, how do those numbers play in where you might have, because you gotta go through clemency and all that.
Right.
Get your rights back. Now, that's the question, how many felons do you have that? There we are.
For folks who are incarcerated, there is a certain code that the census has. But if they're not incarcerated, if they have lost the right to vote and haven't gained that back, we don't know how many people that is.
So you assume they have the right to vote, pretty much, if they're not incarcerated.
They are counted like anybody else, if they responded to a form, they are counted like anybody else.
Any more questions about it? Ready? You okay?
I'm just gonna say this, I just think we ought to leave it alone, in my opinion, like it says. And, there hadn't been no issues. I can tell you start changing, there's gonna be some issues, there are some challenges. But it worked like it is. State ain't said anything, and if the state, if whoever comes in and makes us change it, say, hey, look, we don't have no choice. But right now, one of the main key points that he's got up there at Fullerton is the majority minority. And that district is majority minority, whether we vote countywide or not. We still breaking down districts, we're not talking about voting countywide. And that's just my opinion.
Lady in the corner.
I'm just curious, in Gadsden County and Jefferson County, families, are they single member districts or?
I don't know about Gadsden, Jefferson is single member district. I suspect it's single member, but I don't know.
I got a question, somebody changing the district, you change the district, he's less than 8 years. You change the district, a lot of people don't have transportation. You know, you change this, they're gonna get, a lot of people don't vote. And stay like it is. They schools back, let's stay.
The voter precincts, whenever you redistrict, the precincts will have to follow along with the district lines, and the precincts will change. In some places.
Yeah, but like, we vote here, gonna change, have to go to Round Bluff to vote. You know, a lot of them don't have transportation to where Round Bluff.
Yeah, were you voting at it?
Yeah.
I am too.
Where do you vote, what precinct are you in?
There's a district, it's one, but there's different precincts that they can vote at. We have one of the precincts and then Rock Bluff, the other, like City Hall, and the other, I think.
I'm gonna go ahead and call house.
Anybody in the county can vote at the courthouse,
Right.
not on election day, but early voting, anyone can vote.
Any other questions? You found out about the Bank County Register Clerk, John, today. Mr. Grant, want to hear? And motion to adjourn. Motion.
Second.
Margaret Flau. Singletary. Thank you, Margaret Flau. Meeting adjourned.